Having slain my mother, my nasty stepmother now wants to run my father's $200 million company. She became enraged when I revealed her. Yelling, "Your game is over," she seized me fiercely and flung me off the balcony. Though I suffered some injuries, I fell into the garden below and was safe. I decided on exacting retribution. She woke up the very next day to find an astonishing surprise that turned everything around. Emma Spencer, this is my name. I am 22 years old, and for most of my life I felt I had everything I could ever want. Along with my father, Richard Spencer, I grew up in a lovely brownstone house in an elegant New York City neighborhood. He is my hero, not simply my dad. From the ground up, he created his $200 million business empire, and seeing him work so hard constantly motivated me. Years passed with just the two of us. When I was 10, my mother, Sophia Spencer, died. Although her passing was terrible, Dad and I got through it together. Our relationship seemed to be indelible. And then Rachel entered our life. My stepmother, Rachel Spencer, is everything you would want a socialite to be: glamorous, friendly, and apparently flawless. She swept Dad off his feet when he met her at a charitable banquet some years ago. I was first glad for him. Rachel seemed so gentle and encouraging. He was due to find love once more. She even sought to connect with me by asking about my life and gift buying. Still, there was always something about her that lacked authenticity. Looking back, I overlooked the indicators right from the start. Perhaps I wanted no impression of the envious stepdaughter. Perhaps I wanted to spare my dad from disturbance. In either case, I persuaded myself Rachel was merely trying to fit into our family. For a while, life appeared normal, happy even. Rachel got rather interested with my dad's company. She was naturally able to make him feel as though she valued his efforts, aspirations, and legacy. She pushed him to increase his investments and take more calculated chances. Dad had total faith in her. Then things began to change, though. It started with small details. Rachel would gently remark about me to my dad, sowing questions about me. She would say I was not appreciative of all he had done for me, or that I behaved unappreciatively. At first, I dismissed it since she seemed to be merely acting as a worried stepmother. Still, those remarks began to mount up. Dad seemed to be looking at me differently and asking questions in ways he never had done. About the same time, I began to see Rachel's level of financial involvement with my dad. She knew the ins and outs of his operations, had access to accounts, and frequently advised fledgling businesses that seemed unduly dangerous. I gave it little thought until I listened in on a phone call between Rachel and someone. Speaking softly, she was discussing liquidations and transfers. Her voice was chilly and deliberate, not at all like the woman she passed for around my dad. Though I told myself I was overanalyzing things, a part of me couldn't get rid of the sensation something was quite wrong. That emotion only got stronger when I unintentionally came upon an email on Rachel's laptop. It came from Martin Caldwell, a competing businessman for my dad. In the business sector, he is notorious for destroying his rivals via unethical means. The email was brief but unambiguous. They were cooperating. I thought of myself as having been punched in the gut. My dad's wife, Rachel, was supporting his biggest rival. I knew nothing about what to do. How might I challenge her without evidence? And would Dad believe me even if I did? Rachel had already been planting questions about me. She would twist it to make me seem jealous or paranoid if I went at him only with suspicions. I thus resolved to probe more. I began intently observing Rachel in search of anything that would help to explain her behavior. It was then that I understood her actual degree of danger. I searched Rachel's room one day when she was out. Though I knew it was improper, I didn't give it much thought. I had to know the truth. That really chilled me to my very core. Financial records, hidden bank accounts, emails passed between Rachel and Martin. They intended to move $200 million worth of my dad's assets into under-control accounts. They left the nation and were going to bankrupt him. Still, it was not the end. Reading more of the emails, I came into something even darker. Rachel had been present at the death of my mother. The loss of my mother had always been ascribed as an unfortunate accident. The emails claimed, however, Rachel had planned it. She wanted my dad and his money right along. I found it difficult to breathe. A monster was the woman I had so diligently attempted to fit into my family. She had already snatched my mom from me and was controlling my dad, intending to kill him. Though I had to act, I had no notion where to start. I tried chatting to my dad, but it didn't get very far. When I informed him Rachel was hiding something, "Emma, this is ridiculous," he remarked. "She loves you. Why would she act in ways meant to damage this family?" Though I wanted to yell, I controlled myself. Rachel had twisted his heart, not only his business, as I came to see then. He missed her for who she truly was. I felt more alone than I have in my life that evening as I laid in bed. But I also felt something else: determination. Rachel might have fooled my dad, but she wasn't going to fool me. I would find a way to stop her, no matter what it took. What I didn't know was how far Rachel would go to protect her secrets and how dangerous she could really be. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's face and thought about the emails I had read. The realization that she was planning to ruin my father and had a hand in my mother's death haunted me. I had to act, but I couldn't do it recklessly. Rachel had already managed to turn my dad against me in subtle ways. If I made one wrong move, she would twist it to her advantage. I started by keeping a low profile. Rachel was sharp, and if she noticed me acting differently, she'd know I was on to her. I pretended everything was normal. I greeted her in the mornings, had polite conversations over dinner, and even smiled when she asked about my studies. It was exhausting, but I knew I needed time to gather solid proof. To do that, I began digging into Rachel's life. I checked her laptop whenever she left it unattended. I copied files onto a USB drive and even took photos of the documents I found in her closet. The more I uncovered, the more horrifying the picture became. Rachel had been planning this for years. She'd ingratiated herself into my father's life, gained his trust, and slowly taken control of his finances. She and Martin Caldwell were working together to siphon off the $200 million my father had built over decades. It wasn't just business, though. Rachel had personal motives, too. In one particularly damning email to Martin, she wrote, "Once we finish this, Richard will have nothing left to cling to. Just me. He won't even look at that little brat of a daughter." My stomach churned as I read her words. She didn't just want to steal from my dad. She wanted to destroy our family. But the worst discovery came one evening when I found an old folder hidden in Rachel's closet. Inside were records of a life insurance policy for my mother, Sophia Spencer, and details about the car accident that had killed her. There were notes scribbled in Rachel's handwriting about the timing of the accident, as well as a payment made to someone I didn't recognize. My mom's death had always felt sudden and senseless, but now I knew it wasn't an accident. Rachel had orchestrated it to get my dad and his fortune. I felt sick. Betrayal doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. The woman I had trusted, who had acted like she cared about our family, was a murderer. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to scream at her, to tell my dad everything. But I knew better. She was too good at manipulating him, and I didn't have enough evidence to make him believe me yet. The only person I could trust was myself. Over the next few weeks, I built my case. I gathered emails, bank records, and anything else that connected Rachel to her crimes. I even started recording our conversations when she let her guard down. It wasn't easy. Every day felt like walking a tightrope. Rachel seemed to sense that I was up to something. She started asking more questions, watching me more closely, and making subtle comments to undermine me. One night, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Emma," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "you've been so quiet lately. Is everything okay? Of course, I lied, forcing myself to meet her gaze. Just busy with school. Her smile widened, but her eyes stayed cold. Good. I'd hate to think you were distracted by anything. It's important to focus on the things that matter. I nodded, my heart pounding. Rachel might have been suspicious, but she didn't know exactly what I was doing. Not yet. Things came to a head one night when I overheard Rachel and Martin on a video call. I was coming downstairs to get some water when I heard their voices from the study. The door was slightly ajar, and I froze, listening. Everything's on track, Rachel was saying. The transfers will be finalized next week. Once it's done, Richard will be wiped out. And the girl? Martin asked, his voice cold and calculating. She's a nuisance, Rachel said, but she won't be a problem for much longer. I didn't wait to hear more. I bolted back upstairs, my mind racing. Rachel was planning something. I didn't know what, but I could feel the danger closing in. That night, as I lay in bed, I tried to think of my next move. I needed to warn my dad, but I couldn't go to him without undeniable proof. Rachel was too good at twisting the truth. I decided to wait a few more days to gather just a little more evidence before confronting him. But Rachel didn't give me the chance. The next night, she came into my room. I was sitting on my bed, scrolling through my phone, when she walked in without knocking. She looked furious. "You've been snooping, haven't you?" she demanded, her voice low and venomous. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to stay calm. "Don't play dumb, Emma," she snapped. "I know you've been poking around where you don't belong." I stood up, my heart racing. "What are you so afraid of, Rachel? That I'll tell Dad the truth? That he'll see you for who you really are?" Her face twisted with rage. "You think you're so clever, don't you? But you don't understand what you're dealing with." Before I could respond, she lunged at me. I stumbled back, and before I knew it, she pushed me toward the open balcony door. I tried to grab onto something, but it was too late. I fell. I don't remember hitting the ground. When I woke up, I was lying in the garden, dazed and in pain. Somehow, miraculously, I was alive. Rachel must have thought I was dead because she wasn't there when I opened my eyes. As I lay there, one thought burned in my mind. I had to stop her, no matter what it took. When I woke up in the garden, my entire body ached. My head was spinning, and my heart pounded as the reality of what had just happened hit me. Rachel had tried to kill me. She didn't just want to scare me off or silence me. She wanted me gone for good. But she had failed. I was alive, and now nothing could stop me from exposing her. I managed to drag myself back inside, careful not to make a sound. I couldn't let Rachel know I had survived. I limped to my room, locked the door, and sat on the floor, trembling. My injuries weren't severe. Cuts, bruises, and soreness from the fall, but my mind was racing. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Rachel wasn't just a liar and a thief. She was a murderer. The next morning, I pretended nothing had happened. I stayed in my room most of the day, claiming I wasn't feeling well. Rachel didn't come to check on me, which told me she believed I'd fallen accidentally, or worse, that she thought I wouldn't dare say anything. It was a small advantage, but I intended to use it. I spent the day going through the evidence I had collected, emails, bank records, and notes. All of it painted a damning picture of Rachel and her scheme with Martin Caldwell. I also found a voice memo on my phone from the night I overheard their conversation in the study. It was shaky, but it captured Rachel's words. "Richard will be wiped out." It wasn't just my proof. It was my lifeline. But I knew evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed to make sure Rachel couldn't manipulate my dad once I confronted her. I needed witnesses. That's when I got the idea to use the upcoming charity gala. It was the perfect opportunity. My dad's business associates, family friends, and even the media would be there. Rachel wouldn't be able to weasel her way out of it if I exposed her in front of everyone. In the days leading up to the gala, I stayed out of Rachel's way. I pretended to be the obedient and oblivious stepdaughter she wanted me to be. Every interaction with her was a performance. She smiled at me like nothing had happened, her eyes gleaming with false warmth. But I saw through her act now. I could feel her watching me, trying to gauge whether I suspected anything. Little did she know, I had already planned her downfall. On the day of the gala, I prepared everything. I organized the evidence into a presentation and brought copies of key documents on a flash drive. I even rehearsed what I was going to say. It had to be clear and undeniable, leaving no room for Rachel to twist the narrative. This was my chance to expose her, to save my dad, and to finally get justice for my mom. When the evening arrived, I dressed in my best and walked into the grand ballroom with my head held high. Rachel was already there, charming the guests as usual. She didn't even glance at me. She was too busy playing the perfect hostess. My dad, oblivious as ever, stood beside her, proud and unaware of the storm about to hit. I felt a pang of sadness for him. He had no idea what Rachel had done, what she was capable of. But he would soon. As the evening wore on, I waited for the perfect moment. The room was filled with influential people, business partners, journalists, and friends of the family. I walked up to the stage, my heart pounding. Gripping the microphone tightly, I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something important I need to share." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. My dad looked confused, but Rachel's face froze. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. "This isn't easy for me to say," I began, my voice trembling but steady. "But there's something you all need to know about Rachel Spencer." "This isn't easy for me to say," I began, my voice trembling but steady. "But there's something you all need to know about Rachel Spencer." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I pressed on, not allowing fear to take over. "Rachel has been working with Martin Caldwell, my father's biggest business rival. Together, they've been plotting to steal $200 million from my father's company, dismantling everything he's worked for." Gasps echoed through the room. My dad stood frozen, his face pale with confusion and disbelief. "Emma, what are you talking about?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I have proof," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. I pulled out a flash drive from my purse and handed it to the event's AV technician. "Please show everyone the files." The technician hesitated, but I nodded, and the presentation began to play on the large screen behind me. Emails between Rachel and Martin flashed on the screen, detailing their plan to siphon my dad's assets into offshore accounts. Financial records showed suspicious transfers linked to Rachel. The final slide was the recording of Rachel's voice saying, "Once it's done, Richard will be wiped out." The room was dead silent. I turned back to the audience. "This isn't just about money," I continued, my voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Rachel has gone further than any of us could imagine. She's not only betrayed my father, but also had a hand in the death of my mother, Sophia Spencer. Her death wasn't an accident. It was planned." Another wave of shocked whispers spread through the crowd. My dad staggered back a step, his face contorted with disbelief. "Emma, is this true?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I didn't have to answer. Rachel's reaction said it all. She lunged toward me, her voice sharp and venomous. "You don't know what you're talking about, you little brat. You're making this up." But before she could reach me, 2 uniformed police officers stepped forward. I had contacted them earlier and shared the evidence. They had been waiting in the wings for this exact moment. "Rachel Spencer," one officer said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, embezzlement, and attempted murder." Rachel's face crumpled. She exclaimed, turning to my dad, "Richard, you can't believe this. You know I wouldn't hurt you. She's lying." But my dad remained still. Realizing the reality, his expression turned a mix of agony and wrath as he glared at her. Whispering, "How could you?" His voice swayed with treachery. "How could you treat me differently? In Emma." The room burst into a chorus of whispers and gasps as the cops walked Rachel away. I stood there, heart thumping but resolve unbroken. It concluded. It was all over, the lies, the manipulation, the fear. Rachel's friend Martin Caldwell also got detained in the next days. My dad's company was spared, and the pilfers were found. What Rachel had done to our family was not easily undoable. I had enough to work through, thus did my parents. The part he played allowing Rachel into our life and for questioning me when I attempted to warn him crushed him. "I'm so sorry, Emma," he said one evening as we sat in the living room. "I ought to have believed you. Utter blur the truth for me." "It's not your fault," I murmured, but part of me remained wounded. She missiled both of us. Still here nonetheless but we are. Together, we can rebuild. We also did. We started to recover gently. While I headed back to college with a fresh sense of direction, my dad concentrated on ensuring his company was stronger than ever. Although Rachel's dishonesty had damaged us, it also made me appreciate justice, truth, and resiliency. Her left-behind scars never will totally heal. But one thing is certain as my dad and I forward. We are stronger today. We are rebuilding not just our family, but also our trust together. Resolved to guard what really counts. Our narrative is this: an account of treachery, avarice, and atonement. An account of truth defeating falsehoods. And an account of fortitude amid gloom.